Welcome everyone to the new COVID-19, what are we, 4 now, I guess?
Phase 4?
Phase 4, a few more people here than before. This is the pre-council meeting for the city of Joliet, Monday, July 6th at 5:30. Mayor Robert Odekirk and attendance.
To begin with roll call, Mayor Odekirk.
Here.
Councilman Dickinson.
Here.
Councilwoman Gavin.
Here.
Councilman Hug.
Here.
Councilman Morris.
Here.
Councilman Mudrin.
Here.
Councilwoman Coleman.
Here, Krista, can we turn this down? Because you're kind of far off, it's hard to hear.
Yeah, I did just text.
Oh, great,
the
thank you.
engineer, so we'll be turning it off. Councilwoman Reardon.
Here.
Councilman Turk.
Here.
Krista?
Yep.
With the new seating arrangement, if you guys want to be heard, can you just raise your hand so I can see the four in front of me?
Oh, us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was wondering who he was talking about.
Or not.
I want to be heard.
What's the new restrictions allow us, up to 50?
50.
There are no presentations this evening, so first on the agenda this evening would be citizens to be heard on agenda items. No one has signed up to be called to speak under citizens to be heard. Is there anyone present that would like to speak on an agenda item this evening? Seeing none, we'll pass it over to the city manager to discuss.
Yes, Councilwoman.
Before we get started, can I make a brief statement?
Sure.
Okay, all right. Yes, thank you for the opportunity, Mayor, to make this statement. I just wanted to make some things clear from what I heard over the weekend. And first, let me extend my deepest condolences to the Lori family. I know that having to go back through and relive all of this, but I just wanted to let you know that I did not sign the letter. It was not because I did not agree for an investigation. I certainly wanted that. And matter of fact, we started that the minute that we had saw the video. So I do want to say that to you all, and so I basically wanted to get that clear because I think it was not clear as it was reported. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Okay. Tomorrow's agenda. We have mayoral appointments. We have a reappointment to a member, of a member of the Historic Preservation Commission. Under council committee reports, we'll expect a report from our Land Use and Legislative Committee along with our Public Service Committee. Under consent agenda, as always, we have minutes. We have payroll, which will include the period ending June 4th as well as June 18th. Under licenses and permits and public hearings, this mic is kind of going in and out. That one. We know this is a brand new mic, but thank you, sorry. Under ordinances and resolutions, the first item we have is item 356-20, and this is an ordinance that would enact a text amendment to our zoning code. At the present time, automobile service stations are permitted uses, which means they're allowed by right within the B1, B2, B3, and I1 zoning districts. It's a pretty liberal standard, and my guess is this code was probably enacted back when service stations were sort of mom and pop operations, and the impact on a neighborhood was relatively light. But in view of the fact that service stations of the 2020 era are quite different, staff made a recommendation to our Plan Commission to consider that any service station would require a special use as opposed to be a permitted use, and it would be restricted to the B2, B3, and I1 zoning district, so taking it out of the neighborhood business district. Our Plan Commission agreed. Public hearings were held, and their recommendation was to suggest the council move forward with this by an 8-0 vote. So basically making it more restrictive. Any questions on that? Next ordinance is an ordinance that would amend our 2020 budget to authorize the purchase of property at 10 South Richard Street. This is item 357-20. And I'm going to have Chris Regis give a little bit of background. This is certainly something that has been on our agenda both in closed session as well as open session for really a number of years. It's been put on at the request of the property owner, and why don't you explain it, Chris?
Hi, everyone. Okay, 10 South Richards, like Mr. Jones mentioned, this has been discussed by council in closed session, and without getting into detail, I think everyone who was part of those discussions remembers that over the years, when it was discussed, no clear consensus was reached as to which course of action to take. Just a brief background for the public, there's a home located at 10 South Richards in Joliet that was part of the redevelopment after the factory burned down there. The home was built in 1998. It was purchased by the homeowner. About a little less than 10 years after the home was completed, there were problems with the garage. It was settling and separating from the house. At that time, the home was under warranty. In 2008, that garage was rebuilt. Around 2013 or so, the homeowner noticed that those problems came back. The garage again started to settle and separate from the house. At that time, the homeowner approached the city, and an appraisal was done. Mr. Smith appraised the property at $126,500, and the homeowner began negotiations with the city. Now, the homeowner also retained an attorney at that time, and the parties were working together, and no consensus was reached as to what to do. At one time during those discussions, it was mentioned appraisal value of the home plus $3,500 moving expenses, but like I said, that consensus was never exactly reached between the parties. Those issues kind of fell off the table. Last year, the homeowner re-engaged the city and indicated that he would like something done. I did speak with him, and I did ask him that, I asked him, number one, what he was asking for, and he did say the appraised value plus the $3,500. I did ask him if he was willing to accept anything less, as some options had been discussed along the way. He indicated that he was not, and now this was back in May when I spoke with him, and I asked him if he thought it might be a good idea to just kind of put the brakes on this for a little bit until things might get back to normal. He was not willing to do that. He did call me after that, and that's why when this appeared on the agenda in May, it was tabled at the request of the homeowner, and he called me a couple weeks ago, asked that it be put on the July 7th agenda, and I did put it on the July 7th agenda, so I would anticipate him being here. Are there any questions about this? Okay, thank you.
Our next item is a resolution accepting a dedication of right-of-way for the Rock Run project, which also is known more commonly as the Conan property. This item is going to be removed from the agenda. There's a little bit more discussion that needs to occur with the property owner to the south, so you will not see this. Next resolution, item 361. These are several resolutions that are associated with the Centerpoint Business Center, I-80. And Centerpoint is typically what we think of as the intermodal, but Centerpoint Properties also own some property in the area where the former Caterpillar plant was located. This is a result of a development agreement that occurred back in 2017, and it was never enacted just due to funding issues. But what this really does is it allows for some private funding along with public funding to eliminate a pretty significant lift station and replace it with gravity sewer. So in effect, the city does have some financial obligations here, but in the long run, this is something that will greatly benefit our bottom line. And this was recommended for approval within the Public Service Committee meeting. Any questions? Next resolution is a resolution rescinding Resolution 7518 and implementing amended procedures in order to comply with Gubernatorial Executive Order 2020-43. That's a long way of saying as the governor amends his executive orders relating to COVID, we do the same, basically, to either adopt local aspects of COVID or to coincide with some of the gubernatorial orders. As Councilman Mudgerin mentioned before, this is now phase 4, and in effect, there are a whole new set of rules, and some of them we see here today. What this particular resolution does is, it continues the moratorium on water disconnections, which is something we did as well as the state. But more importantly, public meetings have changed. In the past 3 months, we've had call-in meetings only, and we've even limited the number of people associated with the city to 10 in this room. But now with phase 4, we're allowed up to 50 people, assuming that we do get social distancing. So anyone looking at the floor sees all these little blue X's. We really can't fit 50 people in here with the social distancing, but in effect, we will fit as many people as we can, and we still have some modified procedures whereby call-ins are happening. So this, in effect, allows for attendance at meetings up to 50, subject to social distancing. Also, we continue the practice of folks wearing face masks when they're entering areas where they can't maintain social distancing, and that is pretty much it. So as the governor makes these changes, we do too. Any questions?
Steve, clarification. So as we make the adjustments based on the governor's proclamations, we are still maintaining no shut-offs at this point. Are we also
Correct.
Are we also maintaining no late charges because people are still out of work?
No. The late charges are re-implemented, correct? Right, because it hasn't been covered in this particular revision, so that dropped off.
Well, would anybody else here like to support that? There's still quite a few people out of work. Or do I stand alone?
Well, I don't disagree with people at work. There's also been unemployment and stimulus checks. So at some point, Jim Guidotti's here. Jim, could you address, if we were to continue to waive the late charges, what kind of impact that has on us?
I don't have those numbers, but I will bring them tomorrow.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
And if I understand correctly, Steve, what you're saying is that wasn't part of this original ordinance anyways. The waiver of late fees was separate.
I believe the last proclamation or executive order from the mayor did have it in it.
Well,
And we'll see.
Mayor, I'd like to see the figures before we make a decision.
Yeah, and that could be amended at the council table tomorrow if you seek to add that. Next resolution is item 363. It's a resolution updating and amending the city manager job description. This has been something that has re-entered the radar screen as the Legislative and Land Use Committee have been preparing a job description to begin the city manager search. And what you're seeing is the recommended version that was unanimous at the Legislative and Land Use Committee. Any questions?
If I may, this will be done tomorrow when Terry gives his report on land use. However, we couldn't come to an agreement per se for the interim city manager position / or a deputy city manager position. So we decided to let it go back to the council and decide, because we've been back and forth. And the one thing we wanted to put in there, or I wanted to put in there, and there was some discussion, was if you're an interim city manager, you do not have the power to hire and fire without the consent of the council. And the reason for that being is if you're up and coming from a different department, you're a department head, and you've had a squabble with somebody along the way, or you just don't get along, and for some little reason they don't like it, they can just fire you for no reason, or a made-up reason, if you will. So it was my contention that if you're going to be temporary in a big city like ours, third largest city in the state of Illinois, I don't think an interim with temporary position should have that kind of power. So it went back and forth with me and the other two. So we decided that we would just kick it to the council and let everybody here decide. And we kind of figure it's gonna be a 5-4 vote, but we'll see. Hopefully, we can all come to agreement on that.
The next item is a resolutions associated with the Hobart Road Bridge Extension. This is item 364-20. Chris Regis is going to do a presentation. And to say this has involved less than hundreds of hours of effort on the part of the city, other agencies would probably be an underestimation. So, Chris, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Hi, everyone. Once again, all right, let's start. There are two resolutions involving the Hobart Road extension. Let's start with the easy one. The first one is assignment of the Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU. In 2016, the city of Joliet, IDOT, Will County, and Centerpoint entered into an MOU regarding development of the Hobart Road extension. That development assigns certain responsibilities to the parties. For example, the city of Joliet has a responsibility not only under the Memorandum of Understanding, but also under the lease that we'll talk about in a minute to redevelop Hobart Road from 80 South to the 80 South to Route 6. So that's the city's responsibility. We will retain that responsibility, but what needs to change with the MOU is that Centerpoint is no longer a party to the agreement, as Centerpoint has formed a corporation with other entities to form HRE JV LLC, that's Hobart Road Extension Joint Venture. So Centerpoint wishes to assign their interest in the MOU to the HRE JV. The city staff is recommending we not object to that and accept that assignment. On your agendas, if you refresh your agenda, I'm told you can't do it during the meeting for some reason, but maybe tomorrow, I added an attachment on there regarding the MOU, and that's simply the letter from Centerpoint endorsing the assignment. So are there any questions about the assignment of the MOU? Okay, thank you. You've got, again, as part of the attachments, there's the lease agreement between the city of Joliet and the Hobart Road Extension JV LLC. It was pretty simple at one time, but then the lawyers got involved, and now it's 154 pages with 8 exhibits. And I don't know how much detail you want to get into. I think I'll give you the Reader's Digest, and if there are any questions about it. And Mr. Hanson, you got to tell me if I say anything that's wrong, all right? We've been working on this for coming up on 18 months now, and it was delayed significantly. And the reason it was delayed was because of an ICC opinion regarding the railroad. Part of this bridge project is going to go over the Burlington Northern Railroad on the south side of the Des Plaines River, and Burlington Northern sued Centerpoint and the bridge developers and said they didn't want to grant the easement. That got settled, but the ICC expressed a preference for public ownership over the easement, so that's why the city had to get involved. They threw us a huge curveball, because suddenly this was going from a completely privately owned, city has nothing to do with it other than letting it happen project, to the city has to own this thing. And the last thing that any of us wanted was the city to bite off more than it can chew. At the end of the day, between the approaches and the bridge construction, the number hovers seemingly between around 150 million and 180 million, and we don't have that kind of cash sitting around, so we had to build in a lot of contingencies and protections for the city. The procedure moving forward, and again, this is spelled out in various places just so everyone understands the projected timeline is, let's assume that the agreement is signed after the meeting tomorrow or within the next week. That signing date is the effective date. That effective date starts the diligence period. The diligence period can last for no more than 6 months. During that diligence period, the The HRE JV needs to get all the necessary approvals and permits from all the various agencies, state and federal, that need to be involved in this transaction. At the end of the 6 months, there is the approvals date when all of those approvals have been obtained. Within 30 days after the approvals date, there is the land closing date. The land closing date is just what it sounds like. The city of Joliet will receive good title to the land, not the bridge, the land that's involved in the project. So the city already owns the north side of the Des Plaines River, right? Extending logically from Hobolt to the river, the Ketone development, the council took action a few months back, accepting title of that land. So we already have that. What we do not own is the southern approaches from Vetter Road north to the river. At the land closing, we will get good title, title insurance, and again, all the approvals for construction to begin. At that point, construction can begin. Once substantial completion of construction, the bridge and approaches has been obtained, we have the toll bridge closing. So once again, the toll bridge will have to have been completed, will have to have passed all the necessary inspections, all the necessary government permits. When that happens, the city will receive possession of the toll bridge. Again, it's an estimate, but it's about 2 years construction period for the actual toll bridge and approaches to get done. There are, Exhibit C has the deliverables of the land closing, Exhibit D attached has the deliverables at the toll bridge closing. Again, it's good title to the toll bridge. It's all the necessary permits. Most importantly, it's the insurance policy for full replacement value of that toll bridge in the event of a catastrophic incident. So again, we're looking at around 2.5 years until the operations date commences. At the toll bridge closing, we will lease the bridge back to the HRA JV for a period of 99 years. During that 99 years, the HRE JV is solely responsible for operations and maintenance of the bridge. It's spelled out twice that I could find in the agreement that the HRE JV assumes all responsibilities for the bridge, and that includes assuming liability for operations and maintenance of the bridge. A concern early on was the funding for the maintenance of the bridge. The city of Joliet at this time simply cannot afford to maintain such a large structure. What the HRE has agreed to is an initial funding, a deposit of $6 million to be made in a joint account, which is owned jointly by the city and the HRE JV, so no one entity can take that money for any other purpose. That $6 million fund will be funded. We'll have $120,000 added to it annually. There will be a 5-year, every year there will be a 5-year projected analysis to see where the funding needs to be in 5 years. If there is less than a $1 million shortfall, then the HRE needs to fund that shortfall, so at the projected date that expenses due, the money will be there to cover the expense. If the projected shortfall is more than $1 million, then 2 years out from that projected shortfall, the HRE JVs needs to supply the city of Joliet with an irrevocable letter of credit guaranteeing the funds for that shortfall. So that exhibit, hold on. Exhibit H is the life cycle analysis. The design engineering firm provided us with that analysis. That's a cost projection. You'll see in there that the initial, is according to plan, according to the cost projection, the initial deposit and depositing of funds will fund the maintenance up until about year 25 is when the big ticket items come due. So the city can sit comfortably, assuming the fund is is adequately funded every year, that the bridge will be maintained. Remember, normal operations and maintenance, like snowplow, grass cutting, will not come out of this fund. Only capital maintenance items for the bridge. Are there any questions about it? Yes, sir.
Since you mentioned snow plowing, where's that, is that coming from the city money, from Centerpoint money?
The answer to your question is that is listed in the agreement as a maintenance item that Centerpoint would be responsible for. It was discussed during the negotiations that perhaps Centerpoint would want to contract with the city for snow plowing of the bridge, but it was also made clear that that would have to be subject to a separate agreement, whatever it is. We're not going to make it part of this. But that is an option, to answer your question. What else?
Chris, to be clear, the ICC, the Inland Commerce Commission, basically said prior to making their formal approval or non-approval of the right-of-way, they did say that we really prefer that you own it. Technically speaking, at any point, we could turn it back over after it's done to them and be completely clear of it if they were agreeable to the other side, to the, please give me the alphabet soup again.
The alphabet soup is that...
No, the, the new company.
Oh, sorry, the ICC.
No.
No, the
HRE-JV.
Okay. I'll just call them HRG.
Even I'm confused
All right,
now.
but you know what I'm saying. I mean, it all falls on them in the agreement. We didn't choose to be the owner. However, one of the collateral advantages to owning it and leasing it back, as I read the agreement, is that they can do nothing with the lease as far as selling or transferring it, or with leasehold equities without our permission.
That's correct. They cannot transfer ownership without permission of the city. Now, we cannot unreasonably withhold that, but it's made very clear that any transfer of ownership or of interest in the leasehold needs to be approved by the city, and any transfer of that leasehold interest would have to be to an approved lending institution, not some guy they might owe money to, right? So what I'm talking about is a leasehold mortgage. They can take out a mortgage against the leasehold, not the actual bridge, just their lease interest in the bridge, but that must be with an approved and established lending institution. And more to your question, Councilman, is that, yes, it was not our original intention to own this bridge. What this agreement does is it gets us compliant with the wishes of the ICC. It creates an ability to move forward with the easement over the Burlington Northern Railroad, and it still gets us much-needed relief and improvement to the local infrastructure in a manner that we can all live with. It should be noted that the lease is for 99 years. What happens at the end of the 99-year lease? Well, it can be extended for annual terms by agreement of both parties, but the reality is, at the end of it, I don't think the city wants to own a 99-year-old bridge at that point. The bridge, by terms of the lease, gets turned back over to the HRE-JV at the end of the 99 years. So the way I see it, that minimizes risk to the city all the way around. What other questions are there?
One other question, Chris?
Yes, sir.
To follow up, and if either party defaults on the lease, whether it's the city or HRG, so forth and so on, what happens?
There are different types of defaults in the agreement. Most defaults need to be, per the terms of the agreement, need to be resolved by arbitration. But traditional legal remedies would still apply, contractual remedies like specific performance. And so let's say, for whatever reason, the bridge company would default on something. For the most part, there are exceptions, but there are two exceptions actually. For the most part, we would need to take that to arbitration. Now, there are a whole bunch of steps of dispute resolution before that. The final say would be with arbitration. After year 20, if there is a financial dispute as far as payment goes, we can resolve that in the Will County Courthouse. If there is a cessation of operations, if they just shut down the bridge and quit talking to us, that we can cancel the lease under those terms. Again, but there is a notice period and a cure period during that. So If the city does default, and it would be very difficult for us to default on this, the bridge company can cancel the lease. But again, that's very unlikely that that would happen, because like I said, the city has very few obligations under this, very few performance obligations. The only way that we could potentially default is if we somehow don't have the authority to enter into this, or there is somehow a lien in the Section 6. The tolling, our cut of the tolls is 1% of the tolls collected annually. And again, this is projected math, initially it should be around 100,000 a year, and that can go up. The approved tolling rate for the bridge is up to a ceiling. The projected tolls will not be assessed at that maximum level. So as the years progress, the tolls may increase. If they increase, the cut of the city increases. There is also a $100,000 annual lease payment to the city just for our headaches in dealing with this. So that will be our cut.
And then the naming rights, those will be up like any other thing as far as like for purchase, or how does that going to work?
You had to bring up the naming rights. Here's the deal with naming rights. What we put in there is that, number one, there is a prohibited class of naming rights. We cannot be a drug company, tobacco, alcohol, adult-oriented, things like that are completely impermissible. If the bridge partners secure a naming rights deal, the city is entitled to half of that, and there is a paragraph in there that specifically states that the city approval must come from the city council.
Did you say half?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, if I could just add, Mike, on top of the tolling, it needs to be stressed, and we'll talk about it in detail tomorrow. There's no city money going into this project up front. This is a public-private partnership. I've said before, I flew out to Washington, D.C. probably 3 years ago and had high-level meetings about this, and I was told very specifically, this is the way forward. This is how public works projects are going to be done moving forward. So there'll be a lot more to say tomorrow, Mike, when Centerpoint comes, but I do want to compliment Mike Hanson and Chris Regis. We really got locked up. This probably should have been done 2 years ago, but for the Burlington Northern lawsuit that stalled, and the Governor Rauner's office was really unhappy at that point. And then the ICC ruling, which changed the groundwork of how we had to get this done. But we were at a point about a month and a half ago where I gave an ultimatum to Centerpoint and said, if we can't hammer this out in 4 or 5 weeks, then we're done. We had 2 sets of lawyers that would be arguing for the next 10 years over every detail. And Mike Hanson came over, even during the COVID crisis, practically every day, every afternoon, and sat in an office and worked this out with Chris, and then we took it back to our side. So again, there'll be more to say tomorrow, but the idea that we're getting anything from something that we're not putting any money in is a good deal. Yep.
Chris, when you talked about the administrative expense payment of the $100,000,
Yes, sir.
am I reading this correctly then? It would be 1 year after the bridge is complete. So we're looking at
Before we see
2025
that-
or something of that nature.
Before we see that, I mean, again, the projected timelines, like I said, is 2.5 years. So if it's 1 year after the operations date, it would be 3.5 years. And that's what they asked for. I didn't think it was unreasonable to wait for them to have a positive cash flow before we start collecting money for any expenses.
There was another one that's not jumping out to me. Police services, 7-10.
Yes, sir.
So it says there that JPD will provide traffic patrol. Is there a cost factor that we've associated with that, or has that been looked at?
What we did with the police services is we made the terms and conditions of police services identical to what the terms and conditions for police services inside Centerpoint proper is. Centerpoint Way and some of the roadways inside of the park there, those are private roadways. In reality, the police generally would not have jurisdiction on there unless private owner signs off on that. Centerpoint has done that. We essentially said, hey, let our police go in there and enforce the law and do whatever they do. It's the same deal with the bridge. If there's any necessary police service on the bridge, it is JPD, or any enforcement action to be taken on the bridge, the police can also do that. And when we're talking about truck enforcement, not only is that a source of revenue for the city, it's also a tremendous safety factor. So our officers need the authority to go onto the bridge and on the other side of the park to make sure the trucks moving across it are safe. And that's the reason for that provision.
Thank you.
Chris?
Yes, sir.
And in that vein, certainly weight restrictions would apply, so we'd be looking at the same thing with overweight, should somebody be overweight. And that revenue would go to the city.
You
If
are
they're
correct,
coming.
sir.
And the other thing I think you've already covered is the $100,000 guaranteed for administrative costs per year, starting after the first year, as well as the approximated $100,000 in the first few years for our 1% cut, has nothing to do, I think you already covered it, but I want to be clear, to do with any maintenance we might do by contract. That's not part of it. So if we plow, if we take care of anything to do with the bridge, that's a separate contract once they decide whether they want to go private or they want to work with us.
That's correct. Once again, in the agreement, it is very specific and clear that the city of Joliet has no obligations whatsoever with regards to maintenance or improvements on this bridge. That doesn't mean that they can't contract with us for some of it in the future, but that's a completely different matter.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Next section of our agenda are bids and contracts, along with amendments, change orders, and payments. There's nothing I'll highlight in this section. Majority of these were reviewed by our Public Service Committee. That's the end of my report, other than to say happy birthday, Krista.
Oh, happy birthday. Should we break
I
out
know she
in
doesn't
song?
want us to sing to her.
I know, I was about to say, should we break out in song now or what?
No, thank you. Next is public comments. We did have one person who did register to be called to speak. So, and if they're not ready, we can move forward to those in the room. While they're getting her on the line, is there someone in the room here that would like to speak under public comments this evening? If you'd like to speak, you can approach the podium.
I'm here today on behalf of the family of Eric Lurie.
Ma'am, for the record, can you give your name and address, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank
My
you.
name is Mashana Mitchell. I am actually a resident of Romeoville, 710 South Weber Road, Romeoville, Illinois. I've been a lifelong resident of Joliet. We all grew up here. And I just want to know what is being done to address, from my understanding, and I know I don't know everything and you guys are investigating, but I'm a little bit concerned. Most importantly, I don't know all the facts, but what I do know as a nurse, my cousin was not given Narcan on that scene, which could have saved his life. Why? And what's being done to ensure that every officer will carry Narcan?
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay, the caller is ready to speak.
Audrey, this is Mayor Odeker. Can you give your name, address, and comment, please?
Audrey Secco, Joliet, Illinois. Okay, so first I will once again talk about the new city manager job. And this is the 12th month in a row I've spoke about it. So I would like for everyone to just stop showboating and dragging your feet and writing and rewriting job descriptions to waste time and our money. Some of you proved you don't want the best when you fired Marty Shanahan. Some of you also proved you're incapable of being fair and impartial. You know, quit throwing up roadblocks every step of the way just to keep Jones, who at best could be described as average, not dedicated, and hire a permanent city manager already. I really feel it's time to grow up and quit making fools out of the voters. People are paying attention, and we don't like what we see happening. And another comment I have is why the Mudron Five didn't sign the letter to the Attorney General. What are you trying to hide? Or who are you trying to protect? Another subject is the library again. My understanding is they don't want to wait for state money and selfishly want Joliet to put the money up now, and then Joliet has to recover the money from the state. Why the rush? This will be interesting to see how the free-spending Mudron Five wants Jones to recommend this. Will he put the people of Joliet or the wants of the library first? And finally, this comment is directly to Mayor. I have respected you back when you were a councilman, and I don't always agree with your thinking, but I do believe you always have the city's best interest at heart. And I appreciate the way you have not let the many recent distractions affect your ability to keep our city running so well. So the last two times I spoke, I did not remember to give you my vote of confidence and support. So I am voicing it now. And you stay strong, Mayor. There are many in Joliet that support you. And thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak under public comments? Seeing none, I did receive a request for a closed session. Is there a motion to go into closed session to discuss personnel, collective bargaining plan?
Krista?
Yes.
Somebody's raising their hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, can you approach the podium?
Thank you.
My name is Ali Altman. I'm Eric Lury's mother. I have a question. I would like to know if there will be anything done or filed against the officers that murdered my son. This is why I'm here.
I'll address it from my end, and I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry that your family was not provided a copy of that tape. I did receive a call from the lawyer representing your family who was asking to get a copy of the tape prior to being shown on TV. I'm not sure if that happened or not. When I learned I knew about what had happened, just very general details back in January. When I learned of a police whistleblower who was coming forward saying something wrong had happened, I went to the city manager and the legal department and specifically asked if either of them had seen a copy of this tape that now has been out there. And both reported to me they had not. Neither had I or the council. So I asked the legal department to get a hold of the tape. They did, probably within a couple of days. This is maybe 3 weeks ago. Right before a council meeting, I watched it. I immediately went and got the city manager, brought him into the room, told him, you need to see this. The next meeting, which was a week later, the tape was shown to the entire city council. We agreed in private that all 9 of us were going to sign a letter to either the Attorney General or the U.S. Attorney asking for an independent investigation. That didn't happen. I wrote the letter, 3 other council people signed it. It's been sent to the Attorney General's office. That's, from my end, that's the answer to your question. I'm hoping that there is an independent investigation. I have a lot of questions, not just with what's on the tape, but I've taken issue with what happened here internally. I believe that tape was withheld from our legal department, from the city manager, from the city council for over 5 months. That never should have happened. So I don't want to say much more because I'm asking for an investigation. I don't want to offer opinions. But as mayor, I think I'm comfortable saying that's where we are from my end right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to go into closed session to discuss personnel, collective bargaining, land acquisition or conveyance pending or threatened litigation, after which the meeting will be adjourned?
So moved.
Second. It's been motioned and seconded to approve. Councilman Dickinson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Gavin?
Aye.
Councilman Hug?
Aye?
Councilman Morris?
Aye.
Councilman Mudron?
Aye.
Councilwoman Pullman?
Aye.
Councilwoman Reardon?
Aye.
Councilman Turk?
Aye.
Motion carried.